Wish I could eat your cancer when you turn back. Hey, wait, I gotta look away. Forever dead to your prizes alive. Hey,
And welcome to the very first episode of the Schrodinger's Podcat. Meow. Meow. All right. So anyway, we are here herding cats today. Today you will see that we have the lovely and beautiful Amanda Rockenwitz, who helped me found this show, and it was our idea, so we're pretty excited to see it come to fruition. We also have the stunning and beautiful Avens O'Brien, and we are lucky enough to have Derrick Bros, and I kid you not, on the very first episode ever, he found enough time for us, Larken Rose. So I know, I'm pretty excited about it. So Amanda, you and I, actually, you know what's really funny? You and I were sitting in an actual talk, and I think you leaned over to me and you were like, we should do a podcast. Do you remember how this went down? Could you kind of like start the story? We'll tell it together. It'll be super fun.
Yeah, I believe it was either Carlos Morales or Sterling's talk. And I was thinking about how this weird theme happened on accident at Anarchapulco this year, where a lot of people were sort of, their message that they decided to bring to the stage was related to, being more on instead of being more on the side of, we're anarchists and we're angry and we're pissed off and we hate the state. It was all of it sort of, tied in together as far as this huge connection we all seem to have, where the focus was on relational stuff, and it was on empathy, and it was on self-healing, and it was on, connecting with people, and, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar kind of a thing. And some of us have always been better at doing that than others. But I thought that it was really fascinating to watch so much growth happen from, just a couple of years ago to what was already there. And I think I leaned over to you, Lauren, and I said, it would be really cool to have an anarchist or liberty podcast that, instead of being centered around, really stupid drama, or being centered around, nitpicking at different people and different, ideas that aren't related to statism in the movement, just to pick on people or just to cause division. I thought it would be really neat to have a podcast where we had people that had multiple ideas brought to the table, but people who all have demonstrated knowledge on and experience with, connecting to people or self-healing or actually taking action. And so I thought, with the right amount of people or the right kinds of people, we would have a really productive podcast. And then we could be somebody out there that doesn't come off as totally fucking abrasive and an asshole-like, which is what so much of a lot of the Liberty podcasts out there come off like.
Oh, I totally agree. But it's funny because you tell the story as if you said it calmly, but there was like this intense need for containment in your voice. You were just so excited by the mere thought of us doing this awesome thing. And you and I it escalated super quickly too. We went from you turning to me and saying we should do a podcast and we should talk about these things to, oh my God, who are we going to have on? And it really escalated super quickly. So I know the first person that we thought of, which, obviously the first person we were going to think of was Larken. And Larken, I don't know, Larken, how did we kind of approach you about this?
Probably Amanda just bludgeoned me over the head with it.
Yeah, something like that.
That's how she is. Violent and aggressive. And
I'm actually a lot like you, Lauren, in that when I'm really excited about something, I go full giddy schoolgirl about it. And I'm pretty sure I went to Larken and I was like, oh my God, Larken, we totally have to do everything.
Yeah, and I think we had just had Amanda and I had just had a little private discussion with a few people about things related to this and relationship stuff and this and things that don't really match what I make videos about and write books about, and it's like they're things that matter. It's sort of the human side of it rather than the philosophical side of it. And so it's sort of, it kind of matters if you're talking to people, if you can connect with people as people instead of abstract intellectual concepts and yada, yada, yada. So,
and I actually instantly thought of the fact that there's not a lot of very articulate and intelligent Liberty women who do podcasts. Like there's a ton of us out there, but not a lot of us doing the podcast thing. And I thought, it would be cooler if there was, an actual, several of us together too, where it wasn't mostly dominated by, anarchist men. And the thing is, that saying that alone might rustle some people just because they
rustling jimmies over there.
Don't like anything that sounds like it's, too pro women. But I'm not. It's not about either. It's for me. It's just about the fact that I saw this lack. There's so many podcasts out there, and there's so often only men, or there's like the token chick, but there's not, an even mix, or even ones that are mostly female dominated. There are some, but it's way, they're harder to find, or it's fewer and far between. And I immediately thought of, having Sterling in because of his relational anarchism. And then I thought of Avens immediately because she's just and, communication and articulate,
and she's sexy. I mean, she's just like, everything about her is like complete and utter sex appeal. I mean, why would you not want her on the show? She just makes us look good. Avens,
True.
we came to you kind of after the whole thing started, but I know that there'd been like previous discussions about you. Avens, I kind of like tell the story of how Lauren cornered you. I cornered you.
Well, Lauren likes to speak in the third person occasionally. So, I mean, it's funny because I think I got added to a Facebook group where you were all discussing this subject. So one minute, like, Lauren's messaging me on Facebook and saying, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? And the next minute I see, like, I'm added to a group, and in that group message is, like, a long conversation prior to me starting. And I'm like, oh, shit, I have to go all the way back and read everything. But I know that Amanda actually mentioned part of that like conversation during Anarchapulco, as I remember Amanda saying that she loved the fact that so many talks were different this year, and they were about relating to other people. They were about compassion-filled anarchy, about that kind of root of things, rather than being angry and oppositional and confrontational and contrarian. And so I remember that conversation happening at Anarchapulco, and I think it ended up being a longer conversation that occurred while we were drinking at the bar or hanging out in different contexts while there. And then, so I was kind of
let's not skip over
that we were having this conversation.
Let's not skip over you and I drinking. That was pretty fun. I think that we definitely made a few men uncomfortable that night, and it was awesome being able to not only see all of you at this thing, but be able to get the podcast going. Like, basically the whole idea came to fruition. It's been hard to, like, not tell people. But ultimately, I think that there was a lot of discussion between the two of us while we've been drinking about this podcast as well. So it's a little bit back and forth.
I remember thinking of Derrick because he's always had such a compassionate and thoughtful demeanor and approach to a lot of things, while still being very bold and all of those things too. So I was thinking of, I want a balance of male and female, but I want several people involved. I don't want it to just be a male and a female. I'd like it to be a few women and a few men, and have it really balance out and sort of end up even. And I thought of Sterling and Derrick and Larken instantly, just because, all three of them just understand. I think they're they're on a higher level. I think we can all acknowledge that than some people might be with communication and then reaching people and then, getting into detail and stuff. And of course, I instantly knew Macy had to be a part of it, and I can't wait until she's ready to come join just because she's got an insane, and I love her to death. But yeah, I was thinking of all those people, and I was imagining, I was quick doing like a scan in my head of, who has all these attributes, who talks about things that are, basically on the more mature side of things, self-healing, working on ourselves, not judging others constantly, communicating like an adult, not being, whiny brats about it. And I wanted to think of, who is really on another level with this? And these are the people I thought of immediately.
Well, we all remember, you were like, I was like, oh, we have to do Larken. And you were like, of course Larken. And like, we started going on about that. And then I was like, who we need to get? We need to get Derrick. Like, that was like my first instant reaction to, but it's pretty much my instant reaction to most things, mainly because Derrick's been like a humongous influence on everything I've done since Objectivist Girl. And since finding him, like, I've wandered down this really awesome path that's just been, it's been an awesome journey. And it's all really because of like his books and his stuff. And he's just like, I don't know, he's super inspirational. I'm really excited. And meeting Sterling was like such an honor. I never actually met him in person before in Acapulco. And we'd shared each other's stuff, but we'd never like actually talked. And it was really cool because he was actually super excited to meet me too. And I was surprised by that because he's just, I don't know, he's just such a crazy, awesome thinker. And then of course, Macy and I have been close for a really long time. So, I mean, Macy was like an obvious choice to me. But yeah, no, Derrick, I know that I came and approached you about it. Do you want to kind of tell the story of how you got pulled into this whirlwind?
Yeah, I have no idea. I can't remember.
It's not dragging.
I'm happy to be here though, because I like the discussion, the talk of balance, and that's definitely something that I try to bring through my work, trying to bring balance when communicating with people, and the balance between the feminine and the masculine, and in different areas of life. So I think it's a cool idea to try to bring people together. Sometimes a balance of male and female, and just people generally who are actually interested in helping a message and a lifestyle, a way of life progress and advance into the future of society, and recognizing that the way that's going to happen is through compassionate relational communication and tactics. So yeah, I'm happy to be on board.
I just want to say thanks for being here, Derrick. And before Larken and Derrick's heads explode from all the compliments, I would like to also just throw out that I personally have a tendency to do this. I know Lauren definitely does, even though it's one of the things I love about her.
What do I do?
You guys don't be shy. Like if we're hogging the airspace, message the box if you want to say something.
Message
I really don't
the
want
box.
this to be mostly female dominated either. I don't want it to be either. I'd like it to be kind of even.
I'm dying. Message the box. That might end up being the title of this episode.
Yes.
Message the box. Because we are female dominated for once.
It's a box. It's just a box.
I dare not speak over you.
You have to sometimes run me over. It's okay, because I grew up in a family where they taught by example communication, and the example was everyone talk over each other at the same time, and everyone hopes something gets communicated somewhere in there.
She's not exactly efficient. I have to sometimes train her to a slightly different methodology.
Bulldozing forward.
And I do.
So
I'll remember that.
I think what might be a good topic of conversation from here is what really brought you to liberty? It's like Avens, your story especially interests me. I don't think I've ever asked you. I know that you kind of grew up that way, is kind of the answer I got, but could you like elaborate on that? Your story was super cool when you talked to me about it.
Sure. So I got into libertarianism straight up because of my parents. And so they're very involved in the liberty movement. First, they were involved in the like anti-Vietnam War movement. And then my parents both worked on the Hospers campaign in 1972. So they were both involved in founding the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. And then from that point, they had kids, homeschooled them, ran for office as libertarians in New Hampshire, and were party activists like really early on, and knew some of the greats in the party. So my parents have these great stories of Tony Nathan was our first VP nominee in the LP, and she and my parents like drove her around to different speeches and stuff. And my parents knew Murray Rothbard really well, so like they've got all these random little family stories about the movement in that time, especially in the 70s and into the 80s. And then I think I really internalized a lot of the things that my parents taught me about. They really cared about raising their children peacefully, non-aggression, things like that. But I remember I loved going with my mother when she was doing activism stuff, carrying signs for libertarian candidates in 1996 during the it was Clinton versus Dole versus Harry Brown. And so I remember like carrying signs with her and being like, okay, who are we cheering on? And Mom was like, we're cheering on Harry Brown this year. And I was like, okay. And so I remember telling everyone that I was Harry Brown's gonna be our next president. And I was like 9 years old. It was just ridiculous. But from that, I got really involved in, and then I eventually went on to run for vice chair of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. So I was vice chair from 2006 to 2008. And so what I appreciate about that, and I'm going to let someone else tell their story next, but what I appreciate about the way that I came into Liberty is that, one, it was always a very like natural thing for me. But I've never felt the need to defend my libertarianism. Like I've always, like, this is where I came from. I'm very solidified in it. I'm very solid in it. And so I'm not afraid to have conversations with people that we refer to as statists and say like, hey, let's talk about what you think is right, whatever. And it's not that I'm going to agree with them, but I'm able to have a conversation where I'm not afraid to like put myself in their shoes or think about the different ways that they're looking at a problem, and also realizing that I don't have a lot of context for that. Like I've never thought of the state as a solution for something. Ironically, though, my family voted for Harry Brown, so clearly we thought the state would work for something. But yeah, so that's kind of where I came from and why I got involved, and it just grew from there. It's like I love how I was raised. I love the values in which I was raised, and I've always wanted to share those and to advocate for them in a way that's not aggressive. It's like, hey, I love this thing and I want to share it with other people, and I want to model it in a way that's good and that people who aren't inclined towards liberty naturally can look at my life and look at the things I advocate for and be like, hey, that's kind of cool. That's kind of like, I'm interested. I want to see that. And I want to try that. And so that's kind of how I came into it. And I will stop talking so someone else can.
I mean, I know a little bit about his story. I mean, I didn't do like a ton of research or stalk him or any of that kind of stuff, but I'm joking. But Derrick, could you tell us a little bit about like what got you into liberty, what got you moving in that direction?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the short version because it's, I just like everybody else, I could go on about different things that kind of influenced me or helped me get to the path that I'm on now. But I really think the major shift that happened in my life that led me to to everything I'm doing now was going to prison, getting locked up in 2005. I got arrested for possession of crystal meth the week before I turned 21, and I'd been hooked on crystal and other crazy drugs for about 10 months preceding that, and had been using drugs pretty heavily for a couple of years, like right after high school and stuff. And, looking back now, was able to see just different things that I was avoiding, that I was kind of self-medicating. I had a lot of depression and suicide issues whenever I was younger. So once I got out of high school, drugs just kind of became my main way to process things, and spiraled out until I ended up in prison doing the drug war thing, being a part of the drug war. But it was in prison, and within that area of being able to take time to myself, not the institution itself, of course. It was just, before I even got locked up, I was sort of asking the universe or praying to the universe for a break. Like I felt like time was going so fast that I just needed a pause. I needed things to slow down. And then I got arrested, and I got that pause. And the first time I got locked up, I was sentenced to, I did about 11 months behind bars and in 2 different state institutions, and then got out for 5 months. And I was back after 5 months for another 3 months. And then I was out for a year, and then I was back for another 4 months. So it was this 3 or 4 year experience in and out of jail and prison, probation, parole. And in those experiences in the institutions, I basically just started to ask myself how I got to the position I was now. My family has a pretty heavy history of drug abuse in prison and things like that. So I was really recognizing I was going down a path that I didn't want to. I got into meditation whenever I was locked up. There was, they have the newspaper there every day, and on the weekend, they have a religious section here in the Houston paper, and there was a section on Buddhism, and they just had a quote from the Dhammapada, which is sometimes known as the Buddhist Bible. And I can't remember what it was, what the quote said exactly, but it's just something that struck me really, really heavily. So I had my grandmother send me some books on Buddhism, and I was just getting friends to send me quotes from the Dhammapada so I could read like a chapter at a time, and really just started to use that time and space to reflect and first started to open up my mind and things like that. And it was a couple of years later when I actually just got out and started to pay attention to the world and discovered libertarian philosophy per se, but I've always been an anti-authoritarian. But the reason I think that getting locked up shaped what I'm doing now and my work, the conscious resistance and all that, like it came because I realized that I had internal healing to do. And that really is my message, that people have healing that they have to do that is preventing them from getting past statism and anti-authoritarianism. So it's only through self-healing and individual healing that we're going to be able to overcome those things and actually achieve a more free world, a stateless society, what have you. So yeah, that is probably the biggest thing that led me to going down this path.
Interesting. I was really inspired by your stories when you talked about your drug use beforehand, mainly because the big thing for me was that you advocate for the use of psychedelics. So at some point you kind of figured out the difference between helpful drugs and unhelpful drugs. Could you kind of talk about the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely, like, looking back and now understanding the philosophy that I understand, like, I don't even necessarily think I should have been in jail or prison because I was selling crystal meth. I know that's, obviously that's extreme to some people, not necessarily maybe our group here, but I think I wasn't in a healthy position. And like you said, it wasn't any sort of healthy drugs. I have experiences with psychedelics like, LSD and mushrooms and ayahuasca and DMT, or again, like just meditation, other states of mind, altered states of mind that have brought about great learning and healing and understanding of myself. But things like crystal meth or crack cocaine, or even for me, cocaine, I know some people would argue they can get some sort of something from cocaine, but to me, my experience with those drugs was always very destructive, whereas other things like psychedelics could be used in a way that can, cause introspection and learning and things like that. So, there's definitely a difference, I'd say. And of course, that's subjective between each person's experience. Not everybody's going to have the same experience I had. But overall, I think that there's definitely types of drugs out there and experiences that are destructive and others that can be creative.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my experience, like what launched me into the Liberty spectrum was definitely a good experience with drugs. I haven't been as vocal about it in the past. I mainly like attributed it to my health issues that I had, but also a big factor in it was taking mushrooms for the first time. So I had a serious health issue when I was about 23, and it almost killed me. And I ended up being put through the ringer health-wise. And then when that kind of worked out, I'm gonna go with worked out. I know I'm being super vague, but I'm not super public about my health issues. But what I'm willing to share is when it subsided, I kind of picked up my life and I was like, wow, I haven't done anything, because like when you stare death in the face, you look at life and you just go, wow, I have done nothing with my life. And I hadn't even graduated from college at this point. I was thinking about just quitting college so that I could just do something with my life. And I'm like, I'm just going to finish my last year. It's going to be good. And then I moved to New Hampshire to pursue the Atlas Society. And I was an objectivist for a really long time until I took mushrooms for the first time. And someone I was dating actually talked me into it. And I really didn't like drugs at the time because they scared me, in all honesty. When I took the drugs, I saw my entire life. Like, I went through all of the emotions that I'd felt throughout the years that I didn't even know I'd felt about all the situations that I'd been through. And it was like going through everything. And now that, I'm 28, looking back on the last 5 years of my life has been, since I went through that horrible experience. It's weird to look at the difference in place and mindset, because I felt so low when I was going through that. Like, I might not ever, I might not wake up the next day. And now I feel like not only is every day this awesome opportunity to do everything I want to do, but on top of that, it's like I can do anything. And that's what's kept me going through this whole experience is that I want to empower people and inspire people to realize that they can literally do anything. People are amazing and they are really cool, and people do really cool things with their time when they are empowered and inspired and happy. So that's really kind of my story and my venture into Liberty is it's a combination of death and new life, I guess. It's kind of weird. Avens, why don't you talk about some of your experiences growing up with parents that were libertarian? How would you describe that kind of household? I can't even imagine that.
So growing up libertarian, it was funny because there were two major influences in my parents' philosophy, I think. One was libertarianism, and the other was that my parents were pagan, and so there's kind of a libertarian dynamic there, but also kind of a touchy-feely liberal kind of aspect to a lot of that community. I actually knew a lot of homeschoolers that were pagan instead of being libertarian oriented. So it was an interesting circle to be in. But I think, growing up like that, it was interesting because, I've never in my life thought about the idea that someone might hit their child. I've obviously heard of it. People have, expressed tolerance for spanking or even advocacy for spanking in forums online or in other contexts. But like the entire concept is so foreign to me. Because I can't imagine either of my parents ever like touching me in anger or even like touching me in a way that like I wasn't okay with. Like if I didn't want to be hugged, if I didn't want to be like picked up or something, like I just had to advocate. Like if I didn't want to be tickled, I just had to kind of be like, no, I don't want to do that. And my parents were like, all right, like hands off, like this is your body and we respect it. And that came with everything else, you know, like my food preferences or what I want to do today and stay up and what I want to watch in movies, like what can I rent at the video store? Like all of these things were my own choices. And so I'm trying to think, one of the things I was trying to explain to, dinner at my family dinner table. My parents got divorced when I was like 7. And so when I was probably like 10 or 11, like my family's kind of tradition. My brothers are a little bit older or a lot older than me. They're 9 and 12 years older than me. And my family used to have these dinners at like 6 p.m. My mother would put food on the table, and my mother and my 2 brothers and I, and sometimes house guests. And we would just sit at the dinner table talking for hours about current events, about philosophy, about whatever. Like my family would be at the dinner table from 6 to like 10, just talking, like, and learning so much. And like, and really like, especially if there were family friends or anyone around, we'd really just be like conversing about different things or having debates about things, and then stopping to look something up in the dictionary or in some book, because my family had like a library of books. And so it was just an environment that was constantly conducive to learning and questioning and doing what I wanted. But it also meant that I bore responsibility for what I wanted to do. And so like I built my own routines and my own kind of preferences for my life. And like, I think I was a pretty good kid, but my mother could probably comment on that otherwise.
Okay. Earlier you were talking about, you know, how you got started into liberty. And I thought it was very interesting hearing your story, because it's so different from how so many of us got to grow up. And I thought it was interesting that you mentioned, you know, this approach to, communicating with people non-aggressively. And it's just funny how there are a lot of liberty lovers out there who that's what we're all about. That's where it started to begin with, was non-aggression, or, you know, live and let live. But they get really aggressive in their speech. And so it was really, I like that you pointed that out, because it's kind of, it should be obvious, but it really isn't. So to get into my story, basically, I grew up conservative evangelical Christian, and my parents were Republican, and I didn't know much about politics. I didn't care much until they would sort of seem into it. And then because they're my parents, I would, you know, get into it and go, ooh, rah, yeah. And I just sort of believed whatever it was they kind of thought was right at the time. So I would go along with that in a lot of ways, or assume they must know. And they would talk to me in a way that I thought they were making sense when they talked about politics. So I just sort of went along with it. I didn't really identify with anything hardcore ever. And I think that's why I became an anarchist quickly, once the ideas of real liberty occurred to me. So what happened was around 2011, in the previous relationship I was in, this weird new agey type article online. And I don't even remember how I stumbled across it. But it was this man who had a lot of other bizarre ideas, all of the weirdest stuff you've heard of. But one of the things he was really trying to document was the history of, you know, basically the bankers and the feds and what they were really up to, and what U.S. history kind of really was like, not the, you know, the packaged fake version you get in school. And I was fascinated. Like, I was just fascinated by the notion that I might be wrong about a bunch of stuff. And I didn't know that. So I was eating it up at the time. And then the person I was with at the time also informed me that he knew about the whole federal income tax fraud, and that he had not participated for years in it. And then he had me watch Freedom to Fascism, which was a documentary. And actually, there's a really short clip of Larken somewhere in that documentary. But it was done years ago. And I watched that, and that was really enlightening. And so it started from there. And of course, the logical thing that I thought was the right way to go was, well, obviously we want to be more free. And the founding fathers clearly were about freedom. You know, I had sort of assumed that. I didn't guess otherwise much. And, you know, these guys came in and they undid it all. So we got to get back to the original Constitution. And I kind of went the Ron Paul route. And I got all excited for him. And he said a lot of libertarian stuff. So I was like, I'm into this. This is cool. And then there was a video that someone put on YouTube one day, and I came across it. And I was just hunting for stuff about liberty. I was fascinated. I was watching. And it was called The Philosophy of Liberty. And a lot of people have seen that now. It's gone almost, you know, it's gone almost viral. And it was just this perfectly animated explanation in basic terms of self-ownership, you know, all the way down to this is, you know, I own my body. I own the fruits of my labor, which is my efforts in time. And, you know, I own that. And, you know, no one person has the right to take that from me. And 2 or 3 people don't have the right to take that from me. And 15 people don't have the right to take that from me. And it was so dead on and so irrefutable that I thought, wow, that's amazing. That's so right. And it didn't occur to me that I was still hanging on to remnants of government, that I was still a minarchist. I just thought, wow, that's perfect. That's awesome. And then all of a sudden I started applying that concept to every single scenario where I thought maybe government could be good or legitimate. And that logical concept just dissolved all of that for me. It completely destroyed it. So it was like, whoa, there is no way that anybody, you know, initiating force against a peaceful person is ever legitimate, no matter who they are. And since, you know, the state is constantly this thing interfering and they don't even often know the facts of the situation, and then they usually, well, they're always forcing their will on people. And I thought there's no justification for them existing. That just completely dissolves this. And I had never, ever really, you know, considered that the word anarchist had to do with freedom. I had heard it when it was like a punk, you know, thing in high school. And, you know, there was like a lot of people were going back to that, and Hot Topic is putting out anarchy bands and wristbands and stuff. You know, I just thought it meant like, yeah, I don't like authority. That's cool. But I also thought it was associated with kind of being a little bit rowdy and obnoxious. The Molotov cocktail thing came into play. And I'm sitting there in the car and I go, that dissolves every legitimate form of government. Holy crap. And all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, there is a word for that. And it's not what I originally thought it was. Like my brain just pulled it out of the logs in the back and threw it up and spit it forward after years of not thinking about the word anarchy. And it said, you know, my brain was like, yeah, there's a word for that. Remember? Ding, ding, ding. And for some reason, my brain remembered that the original definition was no rulers. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm an anarchist. Because anarchism really just, the definition is no rulers. And I don't even know how I remember that, but I know that's what it is. So it just completely blew that apart. And that was about 2012. And then right after that, I find, you know, this guy Larken online, and I'm like, it's so plainly and so hard in a way that it's so impossible to get around. I thought, you know, this is the stuff I got to try to show people too. So I was sharing his stuff with my friends, and then I'm looking for other liberty lovers who are talking like he is, and I'm trying to share that stuff. And that's where it began. So I've been an anarchist for 5 years now. And it feels like I always was one on some level. Like some part of me was just waiting to be told, yeah, you're allowed to do what you want as long as you're not hurting anybody. Okay. And so it just sort of clicked for me, and that's how that happened. And so, you know, now that's where I am now. And for me, it was just a progression of, you know, first you get angry, oh, they're oppressing us, and the state is the real evil, and you get mad. And at first I was very emotional about it. And then very quickly I thought, you know, that's not going to win people over. I need to calm down. And so now this is where I am now. This is my approach now. Larken has been an anarchist longer than most people have. So I'll let him talk about how he became an anarchist 20 years ago. Larken?
Yeah. I was actually raised mostly sort of conservative, maybe constitutionalist, libertarian leaning. And I was opinionated, and I like to argue. Imagine that. I know it's hard for people to imagine. That was true even when I was a statist. In fact, I'll throw in this thing that I don't think I've mentioned in public. No one has heard it. That when in school, I did a talk called Peace Through Strength, and it was pro-military. and lots of old people applauded it. And, oh, that was so awesome. That talk was so great. And I look back now and I thought, on principle, I was exactly right, except for my belief in government. Because now peace through strength on a voluntary basis means have a gun to be able to defend yourself. It doesn't mean have a giant authoritarian military. But I guess I sort of accidentally turned into an anarchist because I was opinionated and liked to argue and liked to win. And if you like to win arguments, that sort of requires you to have a consistent argument. Otherwise, you trip over yourself. And based on that, I would have debates and make arguments, and I would notice, there's sort of this area here where I'm not being consistent, or it's sort of vague in my head. And basically, it was a matter of refining, starting back when my reading like John Birch Society stuff, and I would read that, and I don't even know all my influences because I was too young to even know what the heck I was reading or hearing about or from whom. But I just refined it over and over again whenever I found that I was uncomfortable with what I was saying because it didn't all the way make sense. It didn't all the way seem clear and principled. And I refined it until I accidentally one day noticed, oops, I'm an anarchist. And a lot of that was talking to Tessa, and we would talk back and forth, and we would talk to other people, and we sort of both fell off the political spectrum at the same time. We finally figured out how to describe a legitimate moral government, and it isn't government anymore. Oops, it's just private. It's a private protection agency. And so we sort of figured out that we accidentally had turned into anarchists. It wasn't even a matter of arguing. I didn't know any anarchists at the time. Nobody talked me into it. We sort of accidentally talked each other into it just by trying to be consistent. And so we didn't know any at the time. And I would argue on Facebook and this, that, and the other thing. And for years, I only knew a few. But it was, in a sense, I got there not even like I'm looking for some profound spiritual truth. It was just, I want to be better at arguing. And it's a lot harder to argue something that doesn't make any sense, i.e. statism, than it is to argue something that's actually consistent, i.e. anarchism. And so I accidentally got there, coming from the vantage point of a authoritarian, pro-military, pro-police, yes, embarrassingly enough, I was pro-police, position to finally figuring out that voluntarism is the only consistent position. So if you want to win arguments, have a consistent position, and on the political spectrum, there's only one. It's called anarchism.
To be clear, I think just to jump in, you said Facebook, and Facebook was not around when you were arguing in like what, AOL chat room?
It was AOL chat room. I was Ragnar 1996 after Ragnar Danishold from Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I was Ragnar 1996 when I first became an anarchist, and that's why I remember that it was 96 because of that name I had in AOL chat rooms. So it was completely accidental, but I ended up in the right place, so whatever.
Larken, have I ever told you that my brother my brother's name is Ragnar?
No, that's awesome. Maybe I was named after him and didn't know it.
No,
was
my
he named
parents
after
were.
the Ayn Rand?
My parents were giant Atlas Shrugged fans at the time. He was born in 1975, and so yeah, he was Ragnar, and then my other brother, who goes by Lars, which is his middle name, his first name is Hagbard, which is the name of the submarine captain in the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea.
Okay.
And then when I was born, so it was Ragnar and Hagbard, and then when I was born, my parents really debated because I was almost Dagny Kira, and then my parents were like, you know what, like, maybe we shouldn't give her like such a loaded name. We already did that with the boys, so they named me after a flower instead. Like I got a completely like non-baggage name.
Right. Nice, outstanding.
I also love the tagline can now be Larken Rose arguing to anarchy.
Yeah. You were going to say something a little bit ago, and Lauren said to bring it up.
Yeah. So one of the things I thought was interesting is, Amanda, you talked about the your background a little bit, the Ron Paul thing. And I noticed that a lot of people have come from the Ron Paul movement. I mean, Students for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty are both kind of very Ron Paul centric. And there have been a lot of people who started with someone like Ron Paul in 2008, and then got into anarchy or just other forms of libertarianism, either within the party or within the greater movement. Things like agorism and all these different offshoots of libertarianism. But it's funny because when I was growing up, one of the things that they used to do a lot in the Libertarian Party was they used to talk about there was like a Revolutionary War / 1776 fetish. Like, it was like everyone wanted to talk about like how we're going to go back to those good old days when we signed the Constitution and bring it back to how it was. And Ron Paul had a little bit of that, and it's funny because though I get it and I appreciate I appreciate what the Constitution was in the context in which it was created, which was an epic piece of human history, as people look for something freer than they'd been in, But it's funny because as I've noticed the evolution of the libertarian movement, I've noticed more recently, and especially among relational anarchists, I've noticed that we're all starting to talk about the future, the journey towards more freedom, rather than this kind of let's dial it back to where we were back then. Because something I used to notice back then with the whole 1776 fetishism that was happening is I noticed that I think it's honestly something that kind of turns off some women and minorities. And I mean, that's a very generalized statement to make, but I remember at one point arguing with fellow Libertarian Party members about this in 2007 and being like, maybe that's not the best marketing ploy for people who didn't have rights in 1776, such as women or Black people who were owned by the people that wrote the Constitution. Anyway, I was thinking that it might be interesting to talk about that kind of how the evolution has happened, where we used to talk about 1776 and why it was so amazing, and now we're starting to talk about no, the human journey is towards freedom, which means we need to move ahead, not go back.
Yeah, I wish someone could get that message to Alex Jones. That would be really cool. It's funny because he was still crucial.
Amanda, mic drop.
Yeah, right.
You just insulted Alex Jones.
On the journey for a lot of people. I know a lot of people who are like, Alex Jones is, he was a stepping stone just because he's so fiery and he gets people riled up. And then very quickly I just noticed, and this is before he went full Trump, but very quickly I noticed early on just, you're constantly about everything to be afraid of, and you're constantly, shouting and abrasive. And I thought, I'm just getting sick of listening to you. I really don't want to listen to this. And, it's cool that you might play a role in waking people up to that. At least there's something wrong with the world. But I just moved on from that. And I think the 1776 thing ties in with that. Like you said, 1776 kind of putting off, women and minorities in some ways. And I could see that from the perspective that just, is it just a biological trend? We can acknowledge men were the hunters, women were the nurturing, the mothers, and we're vigilant in the way that we protect our young, and we keep an eye out. We're very sharp and we do all this stuff, but we didn't come from this background of always being constantly in battle or warring against stuff or fighting. And I know a lot of women who are just, the stuff that sounds like, yeah, let's go to war, let's have a revolution, let's get involved in a fight with some cops. It's the last thing they want. They don't want to put their kids at danger, and they do want change, and a lot of women are so passionate, but a lot of them, it's they're in a way, a lot of women were quicker to figure out words are going to be a lot more effective, I think. And so I love that there's been this almost like a balance out. There's been a lot of women stepping up and saying, you know what, I have a voice here. I know that I have a role here. I want to bring that to the stage here, and I'm bold and I'm fearless and I can do all this stuff, but I don't need to do it with, guns and swords. I can do it with my words, and I can do it with the way that I talk to people, and I can do it with my, intelligence and beauty and prowess, and tie all those things together. And, and that's why I think it's so cool to see how many women are in the liberty movement. Like, there's so many of us. A lot of people don't know it, but there's so many of us now. It's amazing.
I think this 1776 thing, I feel pretty similar to what Amanda was saying, as far as people like Alex Jones and others really pushing out this mentality. And, it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. As Avens was saying, when we think of that time period, not everyone necessarily feels very, thinks about it in a very romantic type of way. They might understand some of the harsh realities of that time period. And also, I think there's people who really since that time, and even right after, like Lysander Spooner and other individuals, anarchists, who have talked about the trouble with things like the Constitution and that whole time period, and really looking at it with different eyes rather than looking at it as a victory for freedom, looking at it more as a possible victory for sadism and taking people further away from freedom. So there's definitely issues and problems with trying to harken back to this 1776 era rather than trying to create something new that actually represents the health of the people.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about the people getting all rah 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 about 1776, it actually has to do with the cult of personality, where people hear somebody saying something good and principled and they go rah rah rah, and then they want to have heroes. So they sort of go rah, 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 and they ignore the fact that, after saying 4 principled awesome things, he also said 4 stupid authoritarian things. And the founding fathers were a mixture of some things that hardly anybody said and just a reboot of the same authoritarian garbage, which is what the Constitution was. So things, like the Declaration of Independence saying all men are created equal and that we all have inalienable rights. Those are basically anarchist principles. And people go rah, 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 and then people pretend that the Constitution was based on that, when it actually was just a giant betrayal of that. But they get muddled in their heads, and they want heroes, and they want to be able to point to this was the solution to everything, instead of being able to weed through and say, wow, these people said some great stuff, like especially Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry, both of whom didn't like the Constitution. They said a bunch of really great stuff. Even they said some dumb stuff. But they said a bunch of great stuff, but people aren't very good, as a general rule, at weeding out here's the smart things they said, but here's the dumb things they said. And so people go rah, rah, rah about 1776, and now you see people outgrowing that sort of cult of personality thing and saying, here are the really smart things that people were saying around the American Revolution, and here are the patently stupid things that they haven't given up, like slavery is okay, like all men are created equal as long as they're kind of white and male and they own land. And to be able to make those distinctions instead of just following some leader, step past going rah, rah, rah about 1776 and the founding fathers and all that, is figuring out we can be better than them and we know better than them, even though at the time some of the things they were saying were pretty dang revolutionary, not to use a pun. But so it really was a step in the right direction, but people had to go, people have to sift through everything they hear from everybody, the truth from all the garbage. And the Constitution was still authoritarian garbage. But even the concept of a Bill of Rights, there's some things the ruling class isn't allowed to do. That was a fairly unusual concept. And so people say, well, this is the final solution. We're all done. Yay, we have the answer. And it never works that way. You always have to keep thinking, and you always have to keep weeding out the garbage from the truth. And now we're just sort of, humanity is growing up to the point where it isn't just pick a hero and blindly believe everything they say forward. And that's why so many pro-freedom people now say, the Constitution wasn't actually pro-freedom. There were important bits of truth spoken here and there, especially by the anti-federalists. They got everything right. It's not an all or nothing thing. What anybody ever says, it's you have to understand the truth yourself. So I think we're finally starting to outgrow the notion that, well, they said a couple things that sounded cool, so let's deify them and then blindly believe everything they said.
I think it's really funny. You keep talking about outgrowing it. I agree. I couldn't agree more. But even more than that, when you said outgrow, all I could think was, you mean like people outgrow Ayn Rand?
Yep.
And then I realized that I outgrew Ayn Rand. And
So did I. I
so,
was thinking.
yeah, and it's funny because that was actually the point that I was going to make is, I think that we're like so far, at least like the dense part of the movement and the part that's really like making a difference and impacting and getting invited to speak at Acapulco is the group that is completely outgrown concepts like the obsession with 1776 and even politics itself. I mean, we're just moving away from it. I think we've gotten to the point where we realize that our own personal development and our own self-esteem is what is making us feel empowered enough to pursue liberty in our lifetimes, and that we finally realize that that like, you know, and like Derrick's been leading this kind of movement for years, at least that's, you know, my experience with his work, and I'm glad he got me on this path, but and I credit him a lot to that, but also like taking mushrooms made me realize that people are emotional. They're not logical. And if we want to bring more people to the movement and we want to bring them to it, especially like women, not to like stereotype, but I'm going to stereotype. Women are kind of emotional. So when I talk to other people about the movement in general, I talk to them about their own emotional state. I talk to them about how they feel and how the world around them feels and how the world makes them feel. And I get a lot more response than like, oh, you are a Democrat? Well, then you're a fucking idiot. So that's normally, that's normally a good approach in my experience, is to approach people with a heart, with a purpose of trying to connect with them emotionally. Go ahead,
Lauren. I wanted to say something about the emotional woman comment, because I think it's actually, I think it's like human beings are emotional creatures, and typically like people form emotional responses to things and then rationalize those things and try to make themselves, that like, oh, I'm so logical, right? I'm so logical. Here's my emotional thing that, no, I have a logical reason for believing this thing. And I think that what I find about women is that because women have been, in culture have been allowed to or encouraged to work in emotional language and have emotional awareness that a lot of men haven't had the opportunity for various expectations put on them or anything else. I find that like men are super emotional from what I can tell. So are women, but that men aren't often as communicative about that emotional state or their willingness to kind of embrace a certain level of emotionalness, like emotional availability or emotional sensitivity. And so I find that it's less that women are actually emotional and that they're able to have emotional conversations like for real, like for like actually embracing them as emotional conversations rather than just logical ones.
I think that's completely beautiful that you acknowledge that, just so you know. I think that's beautiful, what you just said.
So I have to jump in and totally agree with Avens and on that, and I know Lauren's on board with that. And one of the things I wanted to mention was I find this fascinating. If anybody could ever sort of, someone who's good with psychology the way some of us are. I'm really good with psychology in lots of ways, but I still haven't hacked this one. One of the trends I've noticed that I think is kind of funny is that, I found a lot of men in my regular life growing up, and most of them were statists, right, to be way easier to be around because, it was sort of like I didn't have to worry about emotional outbursts when I was younger compared to some of my friends would sort of get emotional, let it build up, not communicate about it, and then they would surprise me and they'd explode on me, right? And then I joined this thing called the Liberty Community, and it's completely turned on its head. And for the first time in my life, I meet some of the most emotionally intelligent, sound, easy to have a conversation with women that I've ever run into. And I started noticing that there's a huge amount of almost irrationally so emotional men identifying in the as libertarian or anarchist, to the point that they would very easily get catty, whiny, angry, especially in online conversations. And I was noticing a lot of the women coming in and bringing in this balance, and I thought, why does it seem like it's switched? And that was for a while, and then and after a while I saw it started to balance out on both sides. I started to see people just getting more sane stuff, people getting to a point where they were like, this is going nowhere. We need to back off. We need to be more about compassion and relationship. And there are certain men who, that I've met in the movement who never were like that. And they're awesome. And, Larken's one. And then Derrick is definitely one of those people where I've never seen him treat people the way I saw other people in the Liberty Movement do that. But I do think that I came to the conclusion that basically humans, just like Avens said, it's not women or men. It's just humans are emotional creatures. Some people can have conversations about it. Some people can't. And oftentimes it is the women who are better at having conversations about emotions, even if men aren't getting emotional, or they're comfortable to be around. They don't necessarily know how to talk about those things either. So we'll go ahead and start to wrap up, but I want Avens to promote something for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and close this thing up.
I think what we're going to do is have each of us be able to promote to the audience with what we're all doing. So I'm going to wrap by I'm going to add on really quickly to what Amanda said to promote something I'm working on, which is I've been working with the Ladies of Liberty Alliance lately. They're here in Los Angeles. And one of my favorite things about that is I get to sit around and have like meetings with like 30 other libertarian women of various ilks. There's kind of the minarchists and the anarchists and various forms of libertarian-ish women. But it's really cool to see how the liberty movement has grown large enough, or the women in the liberty movement have grown large enough that there's these little pockets where we get to have these female-oriented conversations where we're saying, hey, what brought you into liberty? And so much of it is conversations about compassion and loving other people so much they want to help them be free. And I love the fact that, like, not only am I feeling that way, but there's a whole bunch of other women in the Ladies of Liberty Alliance and elsewhere in the liberty movement that are doing this. But as far as things I'd like to promote, well, everyone should tune in to this podcast next week. But also, people can find me on Facebook. They can find me, actually Facebook, maybe Twitter and stuff, mostly Facebook. Also, and all of my work online can be found at avens.me. That's avens.me. And I'll announce it here. I'm going to be speaking at Pork Fest in New Hampshire in June. So if any of our listeners are going to be there, you will see me. I'm very excited. So I'll let whoever is supposed to go next. Oh, Larken, you should promote yourself now.
Fine, I shall. It's funny because the two sides of this are sort of the intellectual, which is less what we've been covering here, and then the more human, emotional, whatever side. So I'll do one of each. The intellectual would be my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, which is just the philosophical explanation. But at the same time, what Amanda and I are frantically working on now, we just did the first one in Phoenix, is the events called Candles in the Dark, which is about how to connect with other human beings and actually get them to hear you so that when you say stuff and want to share these ideas, you're not talking to a brick wall or making people freak out and run away. And that's hugely important, because you can hear you can have the best message in the world, but if you present it in such a way that people's ears shut down and they run away, it doesn't do any good. You have to be able to actually connect with human beings. And that is what Candles in the Dark is about, is helping to train voluntarists to actually get through to people, not just to be right in their own heads and scream at a brick wall.
Yeah, and I actually, so we're in Acapulco, and what happened is this year in Acapulco, Shepard Humphreys puts together a little seminar called The Psychology of Statism, and it started from that seminar being kind of off the cuff and not having a huge crowd, but doing really well and leading to some really productive discussions. And it was centered around this idea. And then I'm in the back of the cab with Larken, and I said, you know, you've had 20 years of doing this. You so understand the psychology of statists and how to talk to them one-on-one when you're in person with them. And you've converted so many people in person over the years. Why don't we try to equip anarchists that are sort of feeling like they're lacking? They don't really know how to communicate with people about this. They feel sort of stumped. They feel frustrated. They feel like they're just shouting at a brick wall, and they just yell 2 + 2 = 4, and they don't understand why people don't just go, yeah, that's logical, of course. And so I said, we should do this. We could do this a few times a year, and it would fund the Mirror Project, which Larken is working on as much as he can on the side. And then we could actually accomplish something that would be really, really, you know, helpful and is needed in the Liberty community now that it's as big as it is. So, you know, we're basically trying to do these seminars, you know, maybe 5 or 6 at the most in an entire year. And we're trying to go where there's demand. So we ideally don't really want less than 30 seats. And it also depends on the cost of the venue. But if anarchists generate enough interest in their area and they get enough people that say, yeah, we'd throw down for Candles in the Dark seminars, we go, you know, then we'll consider coming to your area. And that's what we like to do. We want to go to the Northeast next. We do want to hit Denver. We like to be in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. And then the other thing is just that on the side, I'm always an artist and a writer, so I'm always open to do side work for people. I am a vocalist. I've been a singer since I was 2. I love to record, and I do have a knack for it. It's why I'm the voice of the Mirror script. And so I'd like any Liberty people in the movement that need voice work. I'll do it on the cheap just because, you know, you're an anarchist and you're fighting for the same cause. And I'll do narration, or I'll do singing, and I'll do. Have you been rapped for a guy on YouTube who has a kid's YouTube channel? It's hilarious. I was the voice of this rapping Elsa from Frozen. It was so hysterical. I had a blast doing it though. So that's it for me. And if you want to take the reins next, Derrick, and promote your work, I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. Really just happy to be a part of this, and thankful to be working alongside such awesome people that are just trying to do something good out there, and it's great to see. As far as what I'm promoting and working on right now, pretty much all of my energy is going towards 2 things. One, my new book, just my 3rd book, final book in the Conscious Resistance trilogy, just came out in early April. It's called The Manifesto of the Free Humans, and I'm really excited. It's been getting good response from everyone who's checked it out, and it's downloadable for free at theconsciousresistance.com/books, along with my 2 other books. And I would be happy if anyone checked that out. And in line with the book release, I'm going to be doing a 52 city tour. I don't really, you know, like calling it a book tour or speaking tour because it has so many other elements to it. Just like the Conscious Resistance itself, we're bringing together meditation, we're bringing together anarchism, we're bringing together music and community activism in the form of what we're calling action days. So basically every single city we're visiting, the 52 cities we're visiting starting June 1st. When we get to each city, we're going to do action days in the form of homeless outreach or park cleanups or community garden volunteering or building gardens, actually showing volunteerism in action and giving people in the community to come be a part of that and work with us. And then we'll be having the evening event, which is going to open up with a short 15-minute meditation, and then talks from my 2 housemates here at the Freethinker House to discuss what we do in Houston, the way that we're involved with the community out here. And then I'll be giving a presentation on freedom cells and agorism, vertical and horizontal agorism, and basically everything that's within the Manifesto of the Free Humans. And then my housemates their band will be playing some music as well. So we're doing that in 52 cities across the U.S., and we're really excited for that. That's pretty much where all my energy is going. We actually just got funded by Bitcoin.com last week, so that's really a big thing. So that's where all my energy is going right now. And you can find out that at theconsciousresistance.com/tour to see where we're going to be at. And if you want to get involved or help, that's always appreciated.
Sweet. Thank you, Derrick. And thank you, Avens and Amanda and Larken. Oh my God. I can't even begin to say like what a humongous, amazing deal this is for me to get to work with you guys. Like I spent the whole day just so excited that this was happening, and it is just I don't know. I'm totally overwhelmed because you're all like my heroes in different ways and my friends and the people that I love. You're just, to get to work with you is just unreal. With that in mind, I'm going to put down the emotional crap and tell you about my other crap. So, well, it's not crap, but if anybody has not watched The Voice of Resistance, it is an incredible documentary. It is my magnum opus. It is the best thing I've ever made. You should 100% watch it. If you are looking for it, it's pretty easy to find on my YouTube channel, Lauren Rumper Productions. I've stopped updating Objectivist Girl, so don't look there. But the big thing that I wanted to talk about in my promotion is what I am working on now, which is I am starting a brand new channel again called the Eleutheromaniac Diaries. And basically, I'm planning on once a week, and it will follow this show. It'll come out at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. It'll premiere in the first week of June, and I am going to be basically updating all of my stuff. I'm going to be talking about what I'm learning every day and how it ties into liberty and my journey and my adventure, and basically like a lot of flow state and meditation and martial arts and how to personally empower yourself and all of these other things, which I think will be beneficial to people. So I hope you guys will check that out. And I'm again have been so honored to work with you guys on this, and I am so grateful. And I hope everyone will tune in next week, where we will have different co-hosts and same co-hosts all in one. And you never know who's going to show up. In fact, I don't even know who's going to show up. And
it's like anarchy or something.
It is. It's like anarchy or something. And I love it. So tune in next week at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays. And I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. And eventually we'll have like a really cool sign-off phrase. But I'm just going to end it with meowing. So thank you for listening. The Schrodinger's Podcat. Meow. 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 Meow.